So I'm Mark Cesario. I'm with IBM, one of what they call the Cloud Technical IT Specialists. And I'm here to present a product called IBM UrbanCode Deploy. It was an acquisition over 2 years ago now. And they actually, the owner, the guy who I guess started the company, Mashe, he actually created this Anthill Pro. How many people have heard of Anthill Pro? It's another CI tool, commercial. And the way the story goes is they started going down that CI path. They realized that to deploy an application, it takes a lot of pieces. You got to coordinate a lot. You have to do workflow. You've got to do the application. You may have to lay down a SQL database and MySQL and lay down your scripts. You may have to lay down an app server and all the configurations that go with that. You may have to, and doing that through a CI tool becomes tough. And then you got all the configurations and all the differences between environments that you have to manage. So he actually worked with the financial institution, and they created UrbanCode Deploy. And it's just a neat product, works consistently. So I'm going to show you a demo that will work. We'll start with Bluemix. How many seen the Bluemix demo? Couple, okay. So Bluemix is a platform as a service. You can literally spin up and spin down a project. You take your IR file or WAR, and you can have that thing up and running in any environment you want in minutes. So we're just going to edit some simple code in some app server. We'll change it. We'll bring it down to what we're going to say Jenkins. Jenkins is going to actually build it for us, and it's going to, with the Jenkins plugins for deploy, we'll push it into deploy, which will then orchestrate it, and then we'll take that and then we'll push that into Bluemix. And you're saying, why don't I just do this in Bluemix? Because a lot of times you may want to do your proprietary stuff on-prem and then push it out to Bluemix for the rest of the world. And that's one use case scenario that's pretty nice to have. So as we go through this, we have plenty of time. Any questions, just raise your hand. I'm here. I do not bite. And my dogs are very small. They're about this big, 2 of them. So I know you guys know Jenkins. It's a great product. We integrate with it. We have a plugin that pushes directly to it. You can do your continuous delivery. For example, we'll actually show you in the demo where we can click a little button, and as soon as the code changes in Bluemix, we commit it, fires it off, Jenkins builds it, pushes it to UCD, goes back up into Bluemix. And we'll do that live. And there is a great return. What you can get with Deploy, you can get the full, real push-button deployments. Instead of just having to push for this app, push for this app, push for this app, and then change some configurations, you can do that all at once. So we have a company, Cisco, you're familiar with. They come to our user conference. They do literally self-service. They have their own website. Underneath the cover, push-button deployments, all done with Deploy. So everything I show you in this GUI all has a REST API and a CLI. So as you mature, you don't need to use the GUI at all. All right, so this is your classic scenario. I'm sure you're familiar with it. You get an email, you make a change, whatever, you built it, you fire it off in Jenkins, it goes to some test environment. Beautiful scenario, works consistently. You probably do it all the time. The challenge is everything's changing. There's different tiers. You have mobile. You have a ton of app servers, database to select from, and you may even have different databases that you have to work with. So orchestrating these applications, you need a workflow engine. You need some orchestration solution. If not, you're doing it with code, scripts, or multiple different instances running at the same time. So I'm not going to go through some of this marketing stuff. Bottom line, it will save you some time. There's some pains out there. Today, are you guys pretty happy with doing your application deployments with Jenkins? You running any problems, any pain points? Everybody's pretty comfortable what they're using. Yes. Okay. We'll show you how you can, hopefully it'll get better. There's got to be some pain out there, I'm sure, because I run into it when I'm out in the field. But it's pretty simple. We have these things called component, and component can be whatever you want it to be. Example, a component can be MySQL, where you're laying down the actual database and then running some scripts against it. A component can be an app server. You're laying down Tomcat or JBoss or whatever it happens to be, and all the configuration to configure that. Or a component can be an actual JUnit test or some functional test that you want to do. It doesn't have to be an actual laying down any bits or binaries. And then you have the actual environments. So you can actually go in, now that you pull out all your configurations, you can have your dev environment be just one machine. You can have your QA be maybe your database and your app server on a separate machine. Then you move to your pre-prod or performance test, and you may have maybe 50 machines with your F5 load balancer. So all of those environments, since we take out all the configurations, we can push our snapshots, as you'll see here, to all those environments with push-button deployments. And build can be underneath, Jenkins can be underneath building it all. And then the how is that orchestration tool I was talking about. We now have a GUI where you can actually build orchestration. You can actually go left and right. So let's say you're going down this path and it fails. You try to lay down MySQL and it fails. What do you do in Jenkins? In this solution, you can actually go right, maybe make a change, maybe check a file, maybe hit something, or maybe even do a manual step, and then go back left. So you can do mitigation steps. So let's look at it. We're going to look at this designer and how that fits together. And again, it's a very scalable architecture. So you define your server, you define your endpoints that you're pushing deployments to, and then we have this server agent. So it can scale to very large, and it has this security capability with the DMZ capability, so it's very secure. So what we're going to have is a collection of components. They could be schema, SQL scripts, they could be, like I talked about, binaries, or they could be basic configurations or just some testing that you have. And we collect that together and make that application, and we can version that. So we create a version. So you have different versions for all the binaries and schemas, but then we also version the application. And once we do that, as we'll see here, we'll create what they call a snapshot. And this is that orchestration tool I was talking about. So at the component level, when you're building out, let's say, that SQL, MySQL component, and you have to lay down MySQL, you have to run some scripts, whatever, you can have these what they call process steps to do that. Same as you're doing today with your scripts, but now you have an orchestration tool. I don't know if you see the little arrows here, the little green arrows. So I can go left or right here. Just happen to be everything is good, but normally in real life you're going to have some red stuff to the right. If it goes right, if it fails, do this. You also have approvals in here. So you can say approvals, this component has to meet certain levels of quality, or this application environment has to meet quality before you can get to that environment. And then with that approvals, you also have this orchestration. So you can say it's got to go this approval first. If he approves it, go this way. If he doesn't approve it, go this way. So you have the same left-right capability. So you develop at the component level, all your components, you make those all work. And then once you have that ready, then you go another place where you can orchestrate, and that's at the application level. That's where you'd have a tough time at Jenkins, just a build tool that just goes down a track. Now you can do an application and coordinate all those different versions of components to build your application. And then you get the push-button deployment. And now all the configurations are taken out of there. That means we can literally sit there with that build component while working together, application, snap it, and we can push it to your next environment, changing these configurations. And those configurations, we can take them outside of the actual script, those process steps. We can also take them outside of the INI file, the properties file. We can tokenize those, so at runtime, when we push them to the endpoints, we'll push in those tokenized changes. So that means you can truly get the push-button deployments consistently running literally hundreds or thousands of builds a day, as they do at Macy's with Deploy. So this is an example of, you got your 1.25 WAR file, you've got your database 1.21 that works, and you've got some config files and maybe some content, all different versions, but you know they work together. You package them. Now you have what we call, in our terms, a snapshot. Let me show you what that looks like. So we snapshot all those different pieces of it, what they call those different versions that work together. We take out all the different URLs, ports, properties, whatever's different, and we can then take that snapshot and push it to any stage we want, and we don't have to hear a developer saying it worked in my environment, or hey, it worked in test, or worked in pre-prod, whatever, or QA. Yeah, guarantee you it will work. So let's look at this. So how does it work in Jenkins? So there is a plugin for Jenkins, and you can go to the website that we have, which I'll show you here, and pull down that plugin, and let me show you that. So if you just Google UrbanCode Deploy plugins, you'll get this website. And if you go to UrbanCode Deploy, up here in the far left there, you'll see we have about 100 and, let me make this bigger, about 100, what is it, 38 or something? Plugins out there. So let's say you want to do Jenkins, which we want to do. There's a Jenkins plugins. You can download that. That actually is a plugin that you do not plug into Deploy, but you plug into Jenkins. So it's a plugin you'll have to plug into Jenkins, and then I'll show you how it works. But But let's say you guys also want to do service tickets. So you want to be able to have your tickets, so you can take your ServiceNow or your Jira or whatever your flavor is, and you can start using tickets within your building of that application. So you may want to fire off your ServiceNow ticket that says, I just completed this, or pull or read your ServiceNow. So let's look at the ServiceNow ticket plugin. There's the ServiceNow. So now you got a plugin for this. So it's a very open architecture. It's built on a plugin. That means we don't touch the base urban code. You can literally develop a plugin between 4 hours and 2 days, depending how complex it is. So I give you a URL where you can develop a Postgres plugin in about 4 hours. Shows you from start to finish. So that's one of the nice capabilities. It grows. IBM provides these plugins. The community provides them, and then we make sure it's clean, but also business partners provides them. So we have a TIBCO plugin. We have an Informatica plugin. So you have a collection of these that you can work with. All right. Enough of that. Let me go back to... Yes?
So the UrbanCode plugin for Jenkins isn't available via Jenkins. You have to go to where you...
Right. And then you do it as any other plugins you do for Jenkins.
So why is that? Why isn't it also in there?
I guess it's our plugin, but it's for Jenkins. I don't see why. I don't know. Does Jenkins have like a plugin location, or oh, they do?
Go into Manage Jenkins, and it shows you all of the available.
Oh yeah. Well, once you take our plugin and you put it in, it shows you how to do that. You'll see it in Manage Jenkins, and you can install it, just like you do any other plugin. You have to bring it in, and it walks you through how to do that when you get the plugin. It's just like any other plugin for Jenkins. You just have that one step to put it into the repository, Jenkins. Okay. So let me see if I can make this bigger, or if I can magnify it. Hold on. Okay. And I want to look at this right here. So if you see up here, it says where you want to actually publish it to UrbanCode Deploy. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a build. We're going to change the code in Bluemix. That's going to fire off Jenkins. It's associated with Jenkins, and Jenkins will build it. And you can see here, it talks about the component. I mentioned component. So the component's going to be some app that we're changing, some index.html. We're going to do. It's going to give us a build number that you'll see here that we're going to see in deploy that Jenkins is going to provide for us. And then we're going to deploy the application called My App, whatever. It's an SIT. These different. This is a slide. Mine's slightly different, but you'll get that. So this allows us to push. So we do the build in Jenkins, automatically push it to deploy, and then we will deploy it. You can do post-build activities if you want to. There's a command line, very rich command line, so you're not stuck using the GUI. So right from your Jenkins, you can go ahead and push it right to deploy and actually finish the deployment. All right. We went to the plugins. We did that. We also have 2 other products with UrbanCode, really one other now. We have a thing called UrbanCode Release. So UrbanCode Release is when you have multiple applications you're trying to deploy. So for example, if you have Release Manager, you release a product and you have to bring in breakfast or you have to bring in lunch, chances are you can use UrbanCode Release. In other words, you have a lot of collection of applications that you're coordinating for your release. If you're just doing 1 or 2 apps or small and you're already controlling it, that's fine. You probably don't need UrbanCode Release. So UrbanCode Release basically takes your spreadsheet and it provides you a web app and it provides dependencies between the line items for your release. Everything from any manual effort from setting up the network or whatever you need to do to get that release, but it also takes in manual applications that you're doing. They're not part of UrbanCode, and it adds the UrbanCode applications in there. So you may want to look at release if you have large releases. We have one customer out here in the Bay Area. They have about 700 people when they do their quarterly release. And they do their homegrown, and they have a great tool, but they're realizing they've got to get out of that business. So they're looking now using UrbanCode Release. We're starting to use it. And then the last one is UrbanCode Deploy with patterns. Though we no longer have that product, we now added that to UrbanCode Deploy. So you don't have to buy a separate product. And that's a pattern designer. What that allows you to do is we can take your platform, whatever it happens to be, your infrastructure. Let's say you have KVM or you have vCenter, VMware, or maybe you have some off-prem, AWS, or you have Azure, whatever your cloud is or your bare metal, whatever you're using for your VMware, we can take that using our OpenStack technology that we have within the pattern engine and the plugins for these non-OpenStack like AWS and Azure or whatever. We can provide a palette that you can drag your IPs that they provide for you. We can drag the OSs that are part of that vCenter or that Azure, whatever it happens to be, and we can drag the components that you have all cleaned from Deploy, and we can provide a GUI for that. You can actually see the diagram, you can see it. You can flip a tab and you can see the source of that. So now you have software-defined environment. We can actually version your pattern, and you can provision it and fire those images up on AWS or fire those images up on your vCenter. Then you can give it to the developer. He's got his components. His apps are all there. They can go test it, do what they want, and you can, if you want, you can just go ahead and destroy it, delete it, and kill that pattern. So that comes with Deploy. And the point is, the difference from other auto deployment, application deployment tools is we're looking at what we call full stack deployment. The whole stack allows you to do that. So that's part of what we call urban control with patterns. This kind of graphically depicts it, but we have SoftLayer. That's an IBM off-prem solution, but we just announced Azure. We have AWS there, any OpenStack compliant cloud, and vCenter we can integrate with. And this is a release product I was talking about. And I can make this a little bigger so you can see kind of what it looks like. This right here is an example in release of just one of your trains, one of your release for a particular release, .9, whatever it is. And these right here, dev, cert, QA, those are your release environments. On the left are the participating applications. Those are your deploy or your manual applications. And that shows you what's happening in those different release environments, what releases in that particular environment, and where you're at in that release. And there's gates up here. Hard to see them, but we have these gates. And these gates will tell you who can get into that environment. So you can set gates on your components in Deploy. You can then use the CLI to set those gates. You can use REST API, or you can do it through the GUI. And once you set that gate to be unit tested or integrated tested, whatever it is, you set as many gates as you want, you can then stop it from going to that next release environment or letting it into that next release environment. And you can then auto-progress your applications into those environments without you physically doing anything, just by passing those gates. That means you can get true delivery, continuous delivery all the way through your release cycle with your applications that are in Deploy, where you set the gates programmatically. We also integrate with all of your ticketing tools, whether it's ServiceNow or Rally or Jira, whatever it happens to be. And that allows us to do what they call impact analysis. So we can look across your releases and tell you what's impacted. Those service tickets that are against those participating applications for that release. And we give you an idea if they're new tickets or if they're more closer to close or whatever. So we'll give you some level of impact. All right, what else do we have? I think we hit it. All right, this is the demo we're going to do live. We'll start that. Then you guys can go see the game, and we're ready to go. So we'll start with Bluemix. I'll edit some code, a simple line on the index.html, just a simple header line, whatever. We'll commit that. We'll push that. That'll go to our buddy over there, Jenkins. Jenkins will build it. After we build it, first time I do it, we'll manually go in and we'll show how UrbanCode Deploy will take that build done that was completed by Jenkins and had it pushed it to Deploy. We'll see it in Deploy. And then we'll go ahead and push that into the environment, which is actually going to show up back in Bluemix. It's pushing it into Bluemix, basically. It's called a CF push, a Cloud Foundry push. Any questions before we begin? No, that's good. All right, so let's do that. Okay, let me come over here. And gotta hope you guys can see this. Wow, that's small. That's a little small, isn't it? I gotta see if I can change that. Okay, this I can work with. All right. So you're familiar with this, right? Jenkins, we got our web app. Okay. And in fact, let me do this. Where is it? My F7 key. duplicate. Okay. All right, so I can see what you're seeing. So this will be the Jenkins app. Here's the application we have. I'll kind of walk you through this before we start the scenario. And we've got the build. You can see this is the repository I'm going to. So this is called our DevOps services on Bluemix. It's basically our Git repository we're going to use. And then you can see it's doing the build. Eventually we get down to the post-build action, and this is where you'll see publish artifacts, IBM UrbanCode Deploy. This is when you add that plugin. Here's a server I'm using, the UrbanCode Deploy server. And you can see down here it has this little button, deploy. I won't do that, but if I check that, as soon as that code is changed, it'll go off. It hooks up to our Git repository in Bluemix, knows there's a change, does a commit, builds it, pushes it out to Bluemix. We'll do it manually for now, but at the end we'll do it. We'll click this little button and let it run. So it's going to go to an application called Web Application Deploy, which we'll look at shortly. The environment will be dev, so you can have your different environments based on what you're pushing to. And then you could have many processes in deploy. So deploy has all these processes you can do on component. You can do a deploy process. You can do maybe actual rollback. Whatever you can do, as many processes as you need or you want to do. And then we just save that. So that's our what we're going to do with Jenkins. So let's go back here. And we have UrbanCode Deploy. Here's that web application we saw. We talked about those environments. So we're going to be publishing over here to this dev environment. You can see we already have some deployments in there already. So one thing you'll know once you're in deploy, when you deploy something in deploy, you now have inventory. You now know on your endpoints what you have. Can't do that probably what you're doing today. I know I have version 6 out there on this endpoint, and I also know what type of other deployments occurred. You can only have one active deployment on an endpoint, right? But you can also see that I've also deployed some other versions, 6 and 5 and 3. They're not active, but I can always make them active if I want to. So you get inventory, what's happening to your endpoints. This is our web component, the environment we're going to deploy to. The application is web app. That's our component. And what else do we need? Oh yeah, let's go back to our component here. So what's going to happen is we're going to go into the versions here, and we're going to see our new version number 7 show up here once we do our commit and we do that push, and once Jenkins pushes it over here. So Jenkins is going to push a 7 in there, the next build number for us. And once it does that, we're going to manually do this for now, but in the next time we'll have it automatically done by Jenkins for us. We're going to go to this application and we're going to actually go and deploy it. We're going to run a process step, those process deploy step, to push it to Bluemix. Then we'll see the change in Bluemix. Fair enough? All right, let's do it. Any questions before I start? Okay, let's do it. So let me go into our Bluemix little tool here. This is the DevOps services. I don't know if you saw the thing Dave did, if anybody did the Bluemix. We forked the project. Now I want to go edit some code. I just hit edit the code. So let's go ahead and edit the code here, which I think I'm already in. And we can go in and make a change here. So I'll change this by, let's call it by Jenkins instead of Mark. Okay. So let me save that. So I've made some change to the index file. We should see this in the, we bring up the actual web app. Now I'm going to go to the actual Git repository that's hooked up to Jenkins. And I've got to commit this. So I've got, and you can see down here, I've got, what's really nice is that right within Bluemix, you can do all your code changes. You can see the code differences. There's content assist. A lot of stuff you're already familiar with is available. But you can see there's my difference between Mark and Jenkins. So I'll just go ahead and say Jenkins demo. Let's go ahead and commit that. I'll make my selection. We'll commit it. And then I'm going to push that. Push all of that. Once I do that, now it's ready to go, and it can be used by buddies in Jenkins. Okay, so we have that change. Let's go back to Jenkins here. And I'm going to just go ahead and build that. It should hook up to my repository. See there's been a change. Give me build number 7. Push it out to deploy it. So let's see what happens. So I scheduled it. We got the build going. So we can go ahead and watch that. So we can see it successfully went into my repository. It did build it, hopefully. Yeah, build it successfully. And you'll notice we got a build number 7. right? So now it already pushed that over to deploy. So we're not going to go into deploy, and we'll go and check that out. So let's look at our actual dashboard. All right, that's there. Looks at our component. And we have our web component that we're working on. And you can see we now have a version 7. So I already pushed it out there. And if I open up that version that it pushed to, what happens is it locks it down in what's called code station. So just like you have SCM and you got some place to lock down your code, now you have a place to lock down what you're going to push to, what you're going to build to, what you're going to actually deploy to. That means anytime in the future you get audited, you want your governance, you want to know what you did, when you did it, who did it, whatever, what was actually pushed to it, it's all captured and kept in this server. Server can be SQL-based, SQL Server, MySQL, Oracle, or DB2. So you have 4 flavors you can pick. All right, so we have the 7. You can see now I have this BM, this WAR file. If I go ahead and open up that WAR file, let's just do that. It won't take long. Oops. Where is it? Thought I opened it. Let me see what's happening. Okay, and there's my index file. And there's by Jenkins, right? So I haven't done it yet, I haven't built it yet, but that's what we downloaded. Now let's build it so you can actually see it show up. Okay, so now I've got the application, I've got a component. Now I want to make sure I can go ahead and see if we can actually run this thing. So I'm going to go to the application, web application, and I'm going to hit this little button here to actually run it. There's a process, that rolling deploy, and if you remember we had that, there's a process to do that. I'm going to choose my versions. So what will happen in real life, you'll have a collection of these, maybe 8 to 10 different components that make up your application, and you'll pick and choose those versions that work together. And eventually you'll snapshot those, and that's what you'll lock down and push to your different environments. And we'll just add number 7 here. And then when I submit that, this is now going to do the actual push into, and I'll show you that process step after it's done here, because we have some time in between as it starts. So now it's starting. These steps you see right here, these are process orchestration steps, and I'll show you those. And it's running right now. And this deploy right here, if we open up this process step here, and we look at the actual child execution steps, this is the push to Bluemix, and we can open up that. We get a dialog box. You see everything that was done to do the deployment. You now have everything that you see here is captured in that repository. And it's showing us what it's doing, its password, it's getting over here. You can see it's doing the CF push eventually, CF target, and it'll push it over there to Bluemix. And eventually we'll get done. I'll go back to this. But you'll notice I have what process was used. Let me make it a little bigger. What environment did I do the process on? What date, time, who actually did it? So we have actual security. We have logs that tell you can go back in time and say who did it, when did they do it, etc. So I can hit this rolling deploy 3 if I want to. We can go look at that process that we use. Let me make this a little smaller. So basically, I marked all the versions. I did. When you have 2 arrows here, as you can see here. Wow, this is not too big. That's not working out too well. Okay. Go back, make this thing bigger. Okay. So you can do parallel stuff. Whenever you see them on the same line, that means they're going to execute at the exact same time. If I want to go left or right here, I could have done right here and said mitigation go this way if this thing failed, deploy application. I'll just assume all happy path right now. But you can see deploy app here, and you can see we push to Bluemix. So these are process steps. So instead of you having a script, and you have a script where you have a line of, you have to do a bunch of scripts, so this may be 10 or 12 lines of script. We create what they call a plugin step. It's platform independent. So if we have directory 1 or whatever, whether you run it on Linux, whether you run on Windows, whether you run it on AIX, or whether you run on Z, it'll always work. They're platform independent. So there are a lot of pluses with these process steps. Totally audible, go back. So we have that. So essentially, if we go back here and we look at this thing, the process finished. It's all done. We know all the steps were completed. And it took us about 1 minute, 56 seconds. So now let's go back. Now we're going to go to actually Bluemix. And what you'll notice here, there's a 7 out there. That is the one we just did. And if I bring up that application, that web app that's out there, and I get this link right here, and I open up that link, that's where by Jenkins, where I just changed that code from Mark to Jenkins. So this is just a simple example, but you can see if you want to use something like Jenkins, but you got proprietary stuff and you want to keep it on your, within your on-prem, you can also have that and provide it as a binary once they're completed out to your off-prem. So maybe a retailer is a good example of one that actually can use something like this. That has maybe a lot of their analytics, whatever they do not want to put out to something like Bluemix. Not something they want to leave out there. Okay. Any questions?
4:40. 5 minutes late.